I wanted to talk about the use or the creation of joint powers authorities in California legislation and how that's accomplished. Basically, California's government code, Title 1, Division 7, Chapter 5, which is called the Joint Exercise of Powers, provides that the Joint Exercise Powers Act allows two or more public agencies by agreement to exercise powers that are common to those contracting parties. Government Code Section 6502 provides that if authorized by their legislative or governing bodies, then two or more public agencies by agreement can jointly exercise powers common to the contracting parties, including but not limited to the authority to levy a fee, assessment, or tax, even though one or more of those contracting agencies may be located outside the state. Additionally, there's Government Code Section 6502.7 that states again, if they're authorized by their legislative or governing body, that two or more public agencies who have the authority to plan, monitor, control, regulate, dispose of toxics or hazardous waste or materials can, by agreement, jointly exercise these powers common to those two contracting parties. And the contracting parties may provide special services such as persons specially trained, experienced, competent to perform these specialized services. Now, bills that amend the joint, the Joint Exercise of Powers Act are usually to authorize specific private entities to enter into a joint powers agreement with a public agency for a specified purpose. So in these cases, the bill has to specify what services are to be private, for what purpose they're being done, as well as a board to govern the entity that's formed under the JPA law. So you might see bill language such as the following: notwithstanding any other provision of this chapter, one or more private, nonprofit, mutual benefit corporations that are organized pursuant to Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code, formed for purposes of providing services to, and then you specify the agency, may join a joint powers agency or enter into a joint powers agreement with one or more public agencies otherwise established pursuant to this chapter. Any joint powers agency formed pursuant to a joint powers agreement as described in this subdivision shall be deemed a public entity as described in section 6507. You'll also see a provision that begins the purpose of a joint powers agency or agreement formed pursuant to subdivision A shall be to facilitate, and then you explain what it is. The next section you're likely to see is that an agency formed pursuant to subdivision A shall be governed by a board of directors, the composition of which shall be determined by the participating public agency or agencies. The representation of private, nonprofit, mutual benefit corporations on the board of directors shall not exceed 50%. And then usually this is done with a sunset date so that the legislature can come back and evaluate it. And so you'll see language that is, this section shall remain in effect only until January 1, 2025, and as of that date is repealed. So these bills creating a joint powers authority in legislation have several fundamental provisions in order to ensure that a joint powers authority has been properly established and meets the requirements that's found in the California Government Code. And these authorities obviously can serve very important roles for local agencies in the state to utilize.